Welcome to the High Value Sales Show of Eversprint.com. I'm Malcolm Louie, the managing member of Eversprint, and today we're speaking with Carrie McKeegan, the CEO of Greenback Expat Tax Services, a provider of expatriate tax services. Welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thanks for having me.
Carrie, you grew your company's revenue from $1.4 million in 2014 to $3.4 million in 2017, a 184% increase. And in 2018, you hit around 3.8 million. Before we talk about how you grew your company so fast, can you briefly share what your company does beyond my quick intro and how your company differs from the competition?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we do taxes for Americans who live overseas. As many people might know, all Americans, whether they're living abroad and paying taxes in the country that they live or not, need to file taxes each year to the IRS. And so my husband and I started this business about 10 years ago, actually on the back of having problems finding somebody to do our taxes ourselves, to fill that gap.
And how would you say you differ from the competitors out there who can also help with expatriate tax returns?
Sure. Probably two main ways I would say. One is the quality of our accountants. So we've got just terrific accountants. So we've the way that we've structured the business is it's a remote business, which means that we can hire from all over the world. And so what we have is we've got really kind of the cream of the crop in terms of accountants that are CPAs and enrolled agents that are working from home offices all over the U.S. and really have deep expertise, not only in expat taxes, but also in being able to explain taxes to people in a way that they understand, which is fairly hard to find, I have to say, both of those things. And then the other thing I have to say that I think really differentiates us is that we come from starting the business as expats, right? So, I absolutely understand what people need who are living abroad. I have been in that situation where you're frustrated and you're confused and you really kind of need somebody to help sort that out. Whereas most accounting firms start from a very different place, which is they're coming from the point of view of being accountants that then grow their team that way. So we like to think that we really understand customer needs, and we built the business specifically around what we wanted, but then also what other of our peers who are living as expats want to.
Right. Now, the actual tax returns you do, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more? Like, say, how would you differ from, say I had one of the big accounting firms to help me with my expatriate tax returns?
In terms of the actual tax return, so essentially there are obviously the big four do expat tax returns. They usually do that if you're working with say you're working for a company in London and maybe you have PwC or KPMG employed by your firm to do tax returns. But that's definitely a common case. But really who we find in terms of who needs us are individuals who have moved abroad and aren't under the umbrella of a company that's helping them do their taxes and are looking for an individual preparer. Okay. In terms of how we differ and how the difference in the tax returns, our accountants have literally just seen it all, right? So They really understand what the IRS is looking for. And particularly, over the last couple of years, the guidance from the IRS is extremely complicated. So having somebody who really understands those ins and outs really matters. So what we bring to the table is that depth of having seen it all, really understanding what to look for, being able to explain it all, and being able to interpret actually fairly complex code.
Right. So I imagine at the end of the day, a tax return done by your company versus PwC would be roughly the same, similar. I guess the biggest differences would be perhaps the price, the cost of getting it done if you were to hire PwC yourself as opposed to your firm, and maybe the level of interaction between you and your firm and your clients. Would you say those are the key differences?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that it would always be the same outcome on the return.
Okay.
So we do have, people who are absolutely, excellent in terms of finding every last little detail that you need to find in an expat tax return. So I wouldn't say that you would have that same quality if you were going to another company necessarily. I think that really does differentiates us.
Okay.
In terms of price, we're not the cheapest in the market and we're not the most expensive. We like to think that we have very fair pricing. So we obviously have excellent accountants, so we're not looking to be the ones who are the kind of lowest, but we're also not charging PwC type prices.
Right.
who are charging sometimes things like $10,000 for a tax return, which is sort of ludicrous.
Yeah, it's up there. So, okay, got it. Now, you grew your business pretty rapidly over the past 4 years, 1.4 million in 2014 to 3.8 million in 2018. What were the three biggest drivers of your growth during those years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a couple of things. One is that over the last, 10 years or so, we've really built up a brand with customers. So we were pretty much the first firm that was out there that was specializing in expat tax returns. Before that, a lot of the companies that were out there were kind of individual, and it wasn't really companies, it was sort of 1 to maybe 4 team accounting shops that were specializing in, that were, maybe, I don't know, it was a retiree, for example, that was living in Mexico who was helping, the clients that were living there. Or there were a lot of people that were actually using their home accountants to be able to do their tax returns. And we were really one of the first companies that really went out and said, you know what, no, we need somebody really, like a company that really, really understands this very deeply and can help clients around the world. So what we've done, and I think one of the biggest drivers of our success, is really kind of create a lot of educational materials for clients or prospective clients. So, if you're ever looking for anything relating to your tax obligations living abroad and you're searching, it's pretty likely that you'll come across our site and some of the research we've done and some of the articles we've written about expat taxes. So, we've built that up since the very beginning, since we started the business. And what that means is that when people are researching moving abroad, they come across us, they read, they understand what it is we're saying, which, taxes sometimes can be fairly daunting and confusing. And so when they do then move abroad, it's a likely choice that they will then come and choose us. So absolutely kind of those educational materials. We also have a very loyal customer base. So, when we first looked at this business model, we thought, oh gosh, this might be fairly tricky because you've got a lot of people that are moving back home, right? So no matter how good of a job you do with people, you might find that there's a bit of turnover. And there is a little bit of turnover based on that, but actually, it's fairly sticky, and there's a lot of people that are staying abroad longer and longer. So we've definitely had really good success with being able to retain our clients for years and years. And then the last I would say in terms of driver of growth is referral business. So expat communities are pretty tight. People tend to kind of live in the same neighborhoods, maybe in big cities, and they have a lot of common problems and common ground, so people kind of talk about their experiences. And we've been really fortunate to have clients that are happy and that tell their friends about us. So, without needing to spend a lot of time convincing people that we're great, they actually have heard that from their friend. So it's a very easy sell and a very easy client acquisition if somebody already comes kind of pre-excited to work with us because a friend has said something good about us.
Right. So just to recap, the drivers, I noted 4, or maybe 2 of them might be combined together, but the 4 I have on my notes here. 1, you built up a brand with customers, right? Because you're the first out there to provide expat tax returns as a specialty. 2, you created a lot of educational content out there so that people, when they research the tax implications of living abroad, they know of your firm. 3, you have a loyal customer base. They stick around for a while, so which is nice. You don't have to find new customers year in, year out. And 4, referrals from the expat community. Is that right?
Yep.
These 4 drivers?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. Now, in terms of building up your brand, what do you do? What sort of things are you doing to get your awareness out there? I know you're creating educational content, so that helps. Are you doing anything else to get your brand out there?
I mean, to be honest, not really. I know that sounds a little crazy, but we do lots of writing. We do a little bit of PR here and there, right? So we definitely make sure that, as we're seeing different trends that are happening in the world of expat taxes, that we kind of get our names out there and really make sure that journalists understand what's happening. And we do, for example, from a PR perspective, we do an annual survey that's actually just coming up about sort of how people feel about U.S. expat taxes each year, really to get some advocacy and awareness. So we've been doing this, I want to say 5 years or so.
Okay.
So we do things like that, but no, we don't do a tremendous amount of really kind of aggressive marketing. We rely a lot on SEO and the resources that we have out there, as well as referrals.
Right. Okay. And for your second drive, creating a lot of educational materials about expat taxes. I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. Are you running out of topics, or is there always something to write about?
There's always something to write about. So
Okay.
the IRS has been changing things over the last couple of years enough that we definitely are not kind of running low on topics. So in that case, we don't have that problem. But we also find, for example, we just did a webinar last week. And, you each year, a couple of times a year, doing a webinar makes sense, right? So it's not necessarily all unique content. Some things have changed, some haven't. But there is still always that need to continue to educate people that are either have moved abroad a long time ago and didn't know they needed to file taxes, or who have newly moved abroad.
And for number 3, your third driver, you talk about a loyal customer base that's sticky. How long do they typically stay with you?
We tend to find that between 85 and 90% of customers repeat each year.
Well, that's pretty good. I mean, that's like that's almost like a 10 to 20 year lifespan of sticking around with you guys.
Yeah, I don't know if we've only been in business for 10 years, right? So, and we're always looking at, who's worked with us the prior year and comparing based on that. But yes, the point is, it is a very sticky audience.
Yeah. So these guys are possibly still having you help them with their tax returns after they return back to the U.S. then.
Yeah, we do find that people do that. We do, to be honest, that's not really what our goal is. And not saying, we're very grateful if people stay with us, but because we have such a niche specialty in that area, we completely understand that, after somebody, usually that you work with us the first year that they move back, but after a couple years, it might make more sense. Their situation is probably much, much simpler than when they were abroad.
Yeah.
And our pricing isn't set to accommodate that, right? So we have things priced based on expat tax returns. So we don't necessarily, we're grateful when people stay with us, but we also understand if when they move back, especially after their first year back, if they decide to go elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. And just from the numbers you shared, the rough numbers, it does sound like they are working with you, right? I mean, you figure the average expat time abroad, maybe 3 to 5 years, perhaps, before they rotate back home. So
I've never seen data that shows how long expats stay abroad. I've actually looked for it a lot, but there's no kind of hard data on that. So I know kind of in terms of how long people stay with us, but I don't know how long people stay abroad.
Yeah, I just kind of sense it's always like 3 to 5 years, partly because when we were living abroad and our kids are going to the international school, right? You always see people, the students, a third of the class is new every year.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
no, I'm sure anecdotally that is true in some places. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And for number 4, referrals, any ideas, any numbers as to, given 10 of your clients who are working with you, how many of those would actually make a referral for you?
We don't try. So we just recently actually did a formal program, like to be able to track that a bit more. So most of the data we have around referrals is more anecdotal. So we haven't actually pushed that very hard. It's been more something that we're seeing come in, right? So I'll probably have better stats on that in a year or so when we actually have people coming in through, in a tracked way through referrals.
Yep.
But everything we've got so far is more just anecdotal.
Yeah. Well, given how your business has grown so much, primarily from referrals, I imagine, as well as from and I guess to a lesser degree, correct me if I'm wrong, from your content marketing, I would say that your referral rate must be fairly high.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Now, are you proactive in seeking out the referrals from people?
Like I said, we just started a refer a friend program this year. So we've had kind of small programs that we haven't really promoted, but we just actually set one up more formally this year. So I don't, we haven't done a whole lot in the past, but we have, this year we said, hey, you know what, it would make sense for us to kind of formalize this a little bit more. And so we've been trying to do that, but it's only been around for about a month or so. So it's really too early to tell. We're still in kind of testing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're getting referrals that have been a big driver of your growth without being too proactive about it over the past years, once you start being more proactive, I imagine you might see a pretty, a bump up, an acceleration of your growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very cool. For 2019, say we were having another conversation a year from now, and we're talking about, and you're looking back over the past year, what has to have happened in your business for you to feel happy with your company's progress? In particular, what problems do you have now that need to be eliminated? What opportunities do you see need to be captured? And what strengths that you have now that you like to leverage further?
Yeah, I have to say it's looking to be a pretty good year so far. So we, over the last couple years, we went through quite a lot of kind of technical infrastructure builds. So about 3 years ago, we launched a new CRM system, which was Salesforce, and then we built a client portal on top of that the following year. And so, our team, we've all been joking that this is the first year where we're sort of just able to literally kind of, drive the ship without necessarily needing to do a lot of kind of technical infrastructure work. So we're in a pretty good position in that way. In terms of what, so from a challenges perspective, things are looking pretty good. There's always the concern that the IRS will have another shutdown, or, there will be something like that will come up that will sort of send people for a loop. But for now, it's actually looking pretty good. And it hasn't been something that, it wasn't the last government shutdown didn't really impact us at all.
Okay.
So that would be nice. And in terms of, really what success looks like for this year, it's about just continuing to hone and refine the customer, the sort of customer experience that we have, which is a client portal that really kind of helps people fill out a questionnaire and upload their documents. And really our main goal is just making sure that all of the content that we've done and educational research we've done on taxes on the front end, that we're rebuilding that and making sure we have all of that on how somebody would fill out a questionnaire, how they would be able to share information with us, and do some of that on kind of the internal customer side for our customer portal.
Okay. So in regards to strengths, what strengths would you like to leverage further?
I mean, it's literally just about continuing to grow in the way that we have in the past. We've got an excellent team of accountants, and so we're obviously always looking to make sure that they're spending all of their time on customer care. So we're always heavily focused on making sure that their time is absolutely kind of ring fenced to be able to spend time on doing taxes and working with customers. So we're always looking to reduce any little bits of admin here and there on the back end. I wouldn't say that that's something that I'm worried about at the moment, but I would say it's a strength that we're always keeping a really close eye on.
Okay.
Just in terms of other strengths, over the last 2 years or so, we've built a really solid management team. So for me, from a strength perspective, that's pretty huge. As the CEO, that's kind of the holy grail, right? To have a team that can really perform without you, right? And not saying that they perform without me, because I'm still obviously heavily involved, but that's also a really big strength of having really, really good management team that is able to run operations and marketing and the sales side of things all kind of really elegantly. And so it feels like, just in terms of that hitting the 10-year mark as a business, we've also kind of hit that point of operating a little bit more as kind of a mid-sized company rather than a small startup. Which obviously the early days, you don't have as big of a management team as you can when you're a little more fully formed.
Right. Now, how about in terms of opportunities? Is there a particular opportunity that you see, perhaps a niche, a specialty, an additional service, something that you'd like to go deeper in over the next 12 months?
Yeah, no, not really. I have to say, it's always really tempting for businesses, I think, especially around this point in our history, to start to diversify. And I can see all the benefits of doing that, right? I can see how it would make a whole lot of sense for some companies to be able to say, oh, okay, now we know how to do expat taxes. Let's look at expanding to financial services. Let's look at expanding to doing taxes for other countries. And we've actually purposely decided not to go that route, because what our goal really is to make sure that we continue to do what we know how to do extremely well, and that we stay really tight and focused on that. So, we definitely have much more market share to capture, right? So it's not even really market share. It's a lot of people who aren't even filing their taxes right now, or are doing so in a way that, they're using a home accountant or, things like that. But the market size overall, there's anywhere between 4 and 9 million expats, depending on which numbers you you look at. And obviously we have only a tiny fraction of that. So for us, really, the opportunity is about continuing to work with customers and do exactly what we're doing, very well without actually trying to kind of expand into other areas that might sort of accidentally have us take our eye off the ball of what we know how to do well.
Right. Got it. How about in terms of hiring? Do you have enough accountants to match your growth?
We do. Yeah. And actually, I'm really pleased to say that because we don't always, right? That's definitely been something that, if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I would have said, gosh, that's absolutely the hardest thing. Again, kind of going along with the brand in terms of customers, we've also done a lot of work, or our HR manager specifically has done just an excellent job of really kind of nurturing relationships with accountants. And so, we tend to have a good relationship with a lot of accountants that are sort of loosely familiar with the expat space and starting to become more expert. So like, an example is we've got a lady who's now worked with us for, I think it's about 2.5 years. And about 5 years ago, she approached us about a role and we said, you need to have, a couple more years of expat tax, of really deep expat tax experience, and just maintained that relationship over a couple years until she actually had that depth of all of that, and then brought her on the team. So because of the fact that we've now been in that space and really developing relationships with accountants for years and years, we tend to find that we have an easier time hiring. And also just the way that we manage the business, the fact that everyone's working remotely is very hot right now. It's a real, it's something that's really, really desirable. So we've had a really good hiring season. We always do lots of hiring in November, December, January. And we were, literally turning people away. So you're always trying to meet that supply and demand, obviously. But we're in a very fortunate position right now to have a really, really talented team of accountants, and not worried about, being able to fill them with work, but also not worried that we're going to have more business than we can handle either.
I imagine with the timing perspective, right? I mean, potentially the expat tax returns can be filed in June. So, if I was an accountant, I'm really busy with U.S. tax returns, in the first quarter, right? Things slow down after April, then it might be nice to do work with you in the second quarter. Is that how it works?
Yeah, not really, to be honest. So we actually are way less seasonal than you'd think. So we, and it's funny because when we started the business, we thought, oh gosh, this is going to be one of those businesses where you're super busy from April to June and then it really dies down. But you find that expats are familiar with the April 15th deadline. That's just it's kind of in their habit loop to file taxes for April. So you get lots and lots of people that are filing with you for April, even though they don't need to file until June. You obviously have the June deadline. That is very, very busy. And that's the standard expat deadline. But often our biggest deadline of the year is actually October, because depending on what country somebody's living in, they may not have all the documents they need to be able to file for June. So getting an extension to October is actually fairly common. So the only time of year when we're not that busy is kind of November and December, and early January. But we don't tend to hire or bring on people that don't want to work from January to April, because we simply just have so many clients that want to do that. It just, from kind of a workforce planning perspective, it wouldn't really work for us to have people who don't want to be able to work January to April.
Right. So how many accountants do you have on board today? And typically how many clients of yours do they serve?
In terms of how many clients, it varies dramatically, right? So you've got some people that are doing hundreds and hundreds of clients, and you've got some people that are doing 100 clients. Usually, it's kind of reasonable average is somewhere between 200 and 300.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
Wow. Okay.
And you've got, and we've got, I want to say about 40 people on the team right now, many of whom are, not many of whom, but some of whom are new in the last couple of months. So we'll not already obviously built up to that client. We've got a lot of accountants that only work with repeats right now. So only work with the clients that they've worked with in the prior year, because they have a full base of clients. Right.
So you have about 40 accountants on board right now. I guess you divide those 40 into pods somehow, and you have like a manager overseeing them, or is it very flat and you and your senior executive team are in direct contact with those 40?
It's more flat. So we tend to find actually that the expat niche and specialty is enough. We don't have people in groups, focusing on, say, the UK or Europe specifically. We just don't feel that's needed. We've actually tried that model, and it just was sort of overly complicated without us needing to have that specialty. The team is already specialized in and of itself, and they all have clients that are around the world. And it's we have a management team that looks after those accountants, but we don't have multiple layers of that. People are pretty, you tend to find that when you're managing a team of remote people are pretty independent. They're, working on their own. They're contractors, so used to kind of running their own business. So you don't need quite as much of that day-to-day management, because people are they're professionals, and they, kind of know what they're doing.
Yeah, and plus you mentioned earlier, right? You're hiring people who have several years at least of expat tax return experience. So I imagine they pretty much know what needs to be done to get it done.
Yeah.
So, in terms of marketing, you mentioned how you have some people overlooking marketing. I took a look at your online profile from a pay-per-click ad spend as well as from a SEO perspective. I'm not seeing much on the pay-per-click side. In fact, my tools I have show no current ad campaigns running on a pay-per-click side for you. And then on the SEO side, kind of a light presence. My tool gives me a value of the SEO traffic, the equivalent pay-per-click value of your SEO traffic. Not a huge number there as well. What are your thoughts about pay-per-click and SEO?
We don't do much pay-per-click. So we try to turn it on or off as needed, but often we just find that we don't need it. And we also sometimes find that the quality of it isn't as high as the SEO. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking at in terms of SEO and what you're comparing against, but we do have, the majority of our traffic does come from SEO.
Yeah, well, I guess the tool I have, it analyzes the keywords that your site ranks for, and then it looks at what the value of those keywords were or are on a pay-per-click ad basis. So it's kind of working backwards, saying, yeah, you're ranked for these keywords, and you're probably getting this much traffic from those keywords. And if you had a pay-per-click ad to generate that equivalent amount of traffic, it works out to this number per month in terms of dollar value. So that's how I think that tool does its job. And I can't say if it's super accurate or not, but it just kind of gives you a benchmark to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, all right. And what would you say is the impact of the internet on your business? How is it helping you? How is it making it more difficult?
There'd be no way for us to operate without the internet. Yep. We were a 100% remote business that's online. So I would say that, that's not even a consideration for us, because if you couldn't operate online, then we wouldn't have set up our business in the first place.
Right. But in terms of, like, for example, the access to information is higher, right? So, that has benefited your company, that people can find you more easily. But at the same time, it also makes it easier for competitors to set up shop with a model similar to yours as well. Do you see that as a particular threat going forward?
No, that's just the way it's always been for us. So we're a 10-year-old business, and it's never been anything other than that. That's just the way that I think the world works. So to me, that doesn't seem like anything that's emerging. That just is the reality of the way a business like ours would work. Right.
Okay. Got it. 3 last questions for you. If you were to have a billboard somewhere, I know you're kind of a remote business, so it's not as applicable as perhaps a company that has a home office. But if you were to advertise with a billboard somewhere, what would be your billboard message? And keep in mind, most people only see a billboard for 6 seconds before they drive by it.
Yeah, what we say to customers is that if you work with us, you never worry again if your expat taxes are done right. So that's basically our message to customers, that we can sort of take the hassle out of the worry out of expat taxes, of which there's a lot for people that are living abroad. So that would be what our message would sort of revolve around.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was living abroad, I never looked forward to that annual tax return season. It's a headache that I wish I didn't have to deal with.
Yeah.
And my 2 last questions for you. Who are your ideal clients, and what's the best way for them to contact you and your team?
Sure. Ideal clients. So our ideal clients are tech savvy, right? So they're happy to work with somebody over the phone or email or in a client portal. We tend to find that we appeal particularly to clients who want to understand their tax return a bit, so they're happy to have that explained to them, but they also really want to be able to trust an accountant to do the work on their own, right? So they value their time and want to understand how they can kind of change their future tax situation, but are really looking for an expert that can kind of take that off their hands. And we tend to find that our ideal clients generally tend to be in kind of big cities, often in Europe or Australia, for example, or in Asia as well, that are kind of busy working full-time in roles or as entrepreneurs that are happy to that are really excited about the idea of someone taking this off their hands fully.
Okay.
Best way to reach us is on our website, which is www.greenbacktaxservices.com, or email, which is info@greenbacktaxservices.com.
All right. Fantastic. Carrie, it's been awesome having you on my show today. I really enjoyed hearing how you grew your company so fast.
Thanks for having me.